Welcome back to the Studio Shangri-La podcast. The last episode was focused on the inheritance of memes or ideas. And sometimes this can be very constructive and useful, and other times it can be destructive and detrimental, as we're seeing playing out on the world stage today. Not that there aren't a lot of good and wonderful things happening. Nevertheless, what's going on with the continued war machine is disturbing, to say the least. So, in following up to the inheritance of memes, this episode title is Philosophy plus Biology, Foundnetics, and a New Paradigm of Life. Foundnetics is an interesting combination of words, found and genetics. I got this in a dream, actually, interestingly enough. The word Foundnetics. And what's the meaning of it? I was prompted to figure this out afterwards. Lost and found. Foundnetics. The changes to one's genetics that occur from the active choices of personal evolution. How do our genetics change based on the choices we make? And a person could be lost in letting things happen to them as opposed to exercising some agency. I do believe that there is a balance in between. But when you're lost, you're not quite awake, and perhaps there are a lot of things that you don't see, that you're just repeating from rote memory, like a parrot, as it were. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but perhaps there's some kind of push that needs to happen in order to break out of patterns that are not so beneficial anymore, and break out of patterns in order to evolve and create a new paradigm or way of life for oneself. Life generally wants to propagate and thrive, and if there's anything standing in the way, what does it take to break on through to the other side? So, a new paradigm of life could be modeled on nature. That even though you see cycles of decay, like the seasons, for example, nevertheless, the cycles of life, or the overall picture of life, continues. Even with something like a flower, the blooms might fall off, but the plant doesn't die. It continues to recycle. So if we're paying attention to what actually plays out in nature, which predates us by a great deal, and who we have to thank for our existence and evolution, if we're paying attention to what nature does, then we're focused more on creativity and living rather than unsustainable death and destruction. And I've mentioned this before, that perhaps death, when it comes to the human species and a lot of creatures, perhaps it is an evolutionary choice that could be considered a detour of sorts. And that there are some other organisms that have discovered other ways of existing, that is, staying alive for longer and continuing to evolve as an open system rather than a closed system. Now, in science, in biology, the human has been considered by Western thought, Western science, so to speak, has been treated like a closed system for a while. When there's more and more evidence, and really, to be honest with you, just common sense, that a person is not a closed system. And with even advances in the sciences into the invisible realm, so to speak, that of cells, molecules, particles, we see that that isn't true. Whether you're looking from a spiritual or scientific perspective, we see that there's a lot of interactions going on, and it makes good sense to consider ourselves as an open system that's capable of sustainability. Now, for a lot of humanity in the developed or urban world, there's been a separateness from nature and not necessarily going with the flow, but instead sort of dominating or conquering or ignoring. Obviously, nature is always there and affecting us, but perhaps that awareness was shut off for a while. And if I'm being totally fair and considering humans as part of an open system, that means it all has its place. It all has its place. The development of the intellectual capacity has obviously exploded in the past 100 years. Our facility of mind, ingenuity, invention, and creativity. And one of the most recent technological innovations, of course, is computers and computer science and AI. I find it really interestingly useful to consider the further development of humanity through this lens. You see, two seemingly disparate ends of the spectrum coming to meet, that AI, in a way, and this is my opinion, of course, is prompting us by mirroring to be better versions of ourselves. how are we going to evolve physically and intelligently in the world going forward? How are we going to bring together the elements of nature or earth and the element of mind? And I find that with my interactions with AI, that considering this computer science way of thinking, it's really changed me for the better, or is changing. It's a process. And especially concerning decision making, considering the variables of things in a constructive way, in a less heated, not to say unemotional, but a less heated way to consider what is really the desired outcome. There's still feeling and desire, but how does one captain the ship, so to speak, or the chariot, so to speak? How does one take the reins and be an individual that is also part of a larger whole? So it's embracing both. And I know that what I'm talking about here, the interaction with environment, I know that varies culturally, that peoples who live closer to nature, it's just a different culture. But we have, on the opposite end, of course, some very advanced technological development. And both perspectives and ways can be combined constructively to improve life. Interconnectivity through digital media, of course, can be really amazing and fun. However, it is important to stay grounded also and connected with one's physical life and surroundings. The new paradigm of life. We've seen certain cycles continue to repeat. And so now, is it at a turning point of where the shift is ready to occur? So that means, in a lot of cases, going beyond the imagination to be able to make new decisions and different decisions than what has been made before. Well, okay, maybe not in entirety, but some of them new and different decisions. It's a real challenge individually to go beyond the paradigm of what one has experienced before. And I happen to think that despite all the confusion and chaos that may or can occur with vastly interconnected technologies, that it can be also a means of personal and societal expansion as well. Having access to knowledge that one wouldn't have had access to in another time. Having access to others' perspectives. And then having to sort it out. Sorting data. What works? What doesn't? And so, as I mentioned before, computers are an interesting mirror to this. A human-created technology that serves as a means of expansion. Like written language and books. And so, it is an art form, in a way. Art forms help expand evolution. Back to the biology side of things. I think it's very interesting to consider that genetics want to be flexible and variable in a desirable way. In a constructive way that life wants to live, in short. So, are we listening to ourselves as a full entity? Our total body in the sea of mind, right? In the sea of consciousness. Dreams, for example, are interesting because it's been shown that that's a form of bodily cleansing, that cerebrospinal fluid washes down the spinal cord. It's like the body's data dump. Here's what isn't going to be useful, which is really remarkable, I think. And if we actively engage with ourselves, really, with our biology, and these processes that want to happen to help us, it can be that much more powerful. And we can go from feeling lost to being found, in a way, by ourselves. In realizing that we do have the agency to change what might feel like stuck patterns, to create new ones that lead to more life and less destruction, and perhaps even more longevity in a very healthy and vibrant state. I'm not talking about perfection exactly, although I do think life is perfect in a way. I'm talking about desired improvement, to enjoy life, to feel joy, and to see clearly all the wonderful things we have around us in this great universe. Thanks for listening.